Jody here, and we've been getting a lot of questions lately about gardening and canning and things like that, so we've brought in our resident expert, Emily. She runs the blog mysquarefootgarden.net. How long have you been running that blog?
About 2 years.
2 years now. So she has a lot of good tips for beginners, because what she did was she just decided to start documenting the process as she learned it, kind of similar to what we've all done with our food storage. And so we're really excited to go over her gardening stuff. She's going to give us a little square foot gardening 101 lesson today. And on her blog, she splits it up into 4 sections. What are those sections?
Design, build, grow, and eat.
Eat, that's our favorite part, right?
Yeah.
So she's going to go through each of those sections and show you how to get started with your garden. Let's get started.
Great.
Okay, so your first step to square foot gardening is the design phase. So as a brand new beginner, what would I need to know about designing and planning my gardens? I mean, you've got 5 boxes here. That seems a little intense for me, but...
Yeah, well, I would say for a beginner, start small. Maybe 1 or 2 4x4 gardens. This is a 4x4 behind me. And that's going to produce a lot of food, actually.
That seems so small, but...
Yeah, but
so
it does.
Get a lot.
It gets a lot. It takes out all the rows of the traditional garden method. The second thing is, wherever you decide to put it, you want to make sure that it's no more than 2 feet away from where you can walk on a path. So this garden bed is 4x4, and I can get to it from 3 different sides where I can reach in that 2 feet. If I was to do it all the way against the fence and have a big long one, I wouldn't make it deeper than 2 feet, because otherwise you can't reach those squares. It gets really hard to weed, to harvest.
Without stepping in your beds to try to get to them. So
That's
this
right.
one over here is longer, but that's okay.
Because you have 3 different
reach on the
sides that you
sides.
can access the garden from.
Great, that's great.
Okay.
So once you've decided what you're going to build, then the next step is obviously to decide what to plant. Is that right?
That's right. Every year I make myself a garden plan. Some people are maybe less intense than this, but I like to plan out where everything's going to go. I do consider some companion planting, what plants grow well together, what their watering needs are, as well as like when the different things will harvest. If you want to be spontaneous, you really can just go out and say, oh, let me dig up a square and put in some carrots, and that'll be fine. But the nice thing about a plan is that you can keep track of when you planted things. So even though a square looks empty, you know
what's inside of it.
Where have you already put your seeds.
And then you have a history of each year too, which
That's
I've
right.
noticed with my garden that can be really helpful too.
And that every year I learn something and think, oh, next year I'm going to do this. I always, at the end of the year, make sure I write those things down on my plan, and then it's like it's fresh in my mind when I go to do it next time, because I have it all written down.
Right, great. Well, now let's learn how to build our boxes, right?
Great.
So now that we've got our plan in place, it's time to build our boxes. Now, did you build these or buy these? These are pretty nice looking boxes.
I actually built these, but
Did your husband build them or did you build them?
I built them myself.
My husband built mine, so I'm a cheater, I guess.
But building the vinyl actually takes a little bit more skill and tools that most people don't have.
Okay.
So when you're building, there's a couple of choices, wood or vinyl, and then you can either build them yourself or you can purchase them and put them together. I actually did a really extensive post on this that you can get on my site and look at. It covers the cost and the benefits of building versus buying, wood versus vinyl.
Great.
So I would check that out.
So what are all the different parts? There's all kinds of stuff in the garden. It looks a little intimidating.
It's not hard. What you don't see on the bottom is weed mat, that there's a barrier between the ground and the garden. So I have virtually 0 weeds. I spend less than 1% of my gardening on weeding. Next we have the box itself, and then in it is soil, which is called Mel's Mix. It is a combination.
So it's not just dirt from your ground?
No.
Okay.
It is. There's no dirt in here actually. It's a combination of peat moss, vermiculite, and compost.
Now, are those hard to find?
Really easy to find. You can find those at any home and garden store. The vermiculite is maybe the most challenging, but if you can't find vermiculite, you can replace it with perlite instead. And what's nice about this is it doesn't matter how sandy or clay your soil is, this is always going to be perfect soil.
Cool.
The last thing that you see are the grids. This divides your garden into square feet, and that's important, you'll see when we get to the planting section, because you plant everything so many per square foot. And then the other thing you'll see is the irrigation. Now this is my irrigation. The simplest way to irrigate is right here. It's a bucket of sun-warmed water and a cup or a pitcher.
That's good for beginners.
Yeah.
Make it easy.
This is so simple, and you just pour about a cup of water on each plant.
And what about this trellis? Did you build that yourself or did you buy it?
I purchased this trellis from the squarefootgardening.com site. I buy new netting as I need to. This is nylon net, and this is what I'll grow my peas and my tomatoes and my cucumbers on, that they will just grow right up this, and it supports them, makes it easy to pick. I found you don't want to put one against the fence. It's hard to harvest when it's against the fence.
Right. All right, well, let's learn more about growing next.
Great.
All right, so now we're going to be growing our actual plants. That's probably my favorite part of gardening. Now it looks here like, did you start all of these from seed?
These are seed plants that I started from seed, but I really wouldn't recommend that as a beginner. But the reason I have them here to show you is the first step when you've purchased transplants, which are already growing plants from your store, or if you grow them at home, is you need to harden them off. Hardening off is a process where you get them used to the elements so that they can survive being outside in the sun and the wind and the rain.
I've had plants where I throw them in the garden and they just tip over and die right away.
That's right.
It's depressing.
That they just need to sort of get used to it. So you start off, it takes about a week, and you start off the first day and you put them in the shade for about an hour, and then you bring them back inside, and then you increase the amount of time and intense weather conditions until the end of the week you can go ahead and plant them.
Oh, that's great.
And that's just going to really increase your success whenever you're planting.
Can you show us a little of that process?
That's right, we'll do that. Let's hop over to the garden.
So what are we planting now?
Yeah, well, this is dill. Here I've got my pot, my little label. I've started this inside, and it's ready to go outside. I've hardened it off for about a week. It's pretty simple to transplant. All you need is your shovel and your plant. So you just remove a little bit of dirt. You can see how this is really easy to work with.
It is. It just pops right out.
Yeah, it's not heavy or anything like that. And then I'm going to plop my plant right in there. Depending on the plant, I'm going to make it a little bit deeper. You plant it at the same level where it was, or some things you can plant a little deeper.
Like tomatoes, right?
Like tomatoes, because they'll actually grow roots from the stem. So this, I'm going to
And so 1 dill per square is the right amount.
That's right.
And isn't the Square Foot Gardening book, as I recall when I was reading it, kind of gives you a little indicator of how many to plant in each square. Is that right?
Yep. Instead of planting, normally you plant like rows, and then within your row it tells you how far apart to put the plants. With Square Foot Gardening, you ignore the rows and you just use the plant spacing, and you put them as close together as you can in your garden. So for example, I've got some cilantro here. On the back of my cilantro it says to plant it every 6 inches. Well, in a Square Foot garden, every 6 inches is going to be 4 per square. So I get my pencil and I poke 4 holes, even distance apart, and then I'll just take my seeds and I take 2 or 3 per hole, plop them in.
That is so easy.
Yep, and so I just always go in order so I remember where I've planted. And then I just cover it up with this. I'll put a little water on it for both of these, and they'll be good to go.
That's so easy. All right, well, let's move on to the last step, which is eating our food.
Great.
So in eating our foods from our gardens, that kind of plays a big role in designing.
That's
so
right.
You see what you actually ate.
It kind of comes full circle that you
year.
want to plant whatever you're going to eat. If your family doesn't eat zucchini, why would you plant it? If they don't like cucumbers, don't plant cucumbers.
Right.
But if they love peas, plant squares and squares of peas for your family.
And for food storage, a lot of times you can plant enough to store for a year worth of bottled,
That's right.
frozen, all kinds of good preservation techniques.
My goal this last year was to grow enough tomatoes, peppers, onions to make salsa for my family for a year. And I was able to do that. My goal for next year is to make enough to also bottle tomatoes, tomato sauce, all those products.
So is this some of your tomato sauce?
This is actually some of my tomato sauce. So this is my homemade salsa, which I love. And I put the recipe for that on my site. This is frozen tomato sauce. It's the simplest method of doing tomato sauce that I've ever seen. It's really fast and it's delicious.
And all out of your own garden.
All out of my own garden.
Nice.
And that recipe's on my site as well.
Cool. And thank you, Emily, for visiting us from mysquarefootgarden.net.
Yep.
So we'd encourage everyone to go check out her site if you want to get started in gardening. She has some great tips.
Thanks.